Hi, in this video we are going to talk about our next project, which is a product photo shoot. For this project we are going to use just natural light. So we'll talk about that more as we go here, if you're wondering what natural light is. Okay, so now that we've learned about our camera settings and how to adjust them, we are going to put those skills to use. So we will conduct a photo shoot for a product of your choice. I call this a product photo shoot, but this can really be any sort of object that you'd like. So some examples here are, this is like a tangerine. I don't think it's an orange, it's a tangerine, one of those smaller ones. That little guy that you saw in some of my other videos, a ceramic cupcake that I had made. Okay, so you can use anything. I would keep it about the size of a softball approximately, but if you wanted to do like a softball mitt, that would be fine. Or any little object that you have laying around. So our goal for this project is to showcase the object or the product. We're going to think about this as sort of photographing an item for a catalog. So we will do this using natural light for now. And when I say natural light, I mean mostly window light, but if you have an overhead light on as you're doing this project, that's fine too. So don't worry about turning off all of the lights by any means. Okay, so your first step is to pick your product or your object. You can kind of pick any object as I mentioned, but I do have a couple of hints for you. Don't choose anything that is too darkly colored. It makes it difficult to photograph and to light properly. And if you choose a lightly colored object, it might blend into your background. So we are going to set up sort of a white background for these photos. So if you choose like a white golf ball, for instance, that might blend into the background a little bit and make it a little bit harder for you, but it wouldn't make it impossible. So if you want to use one of those objects, that's okay. It'll just turn out a little bit different. It'll be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so step 2 is our setup. I started here. I'm working in my office, so hey, what the heck, I used what I had available. So you're going to need something to put your object and your backdrop on. I grabbed these chairs right here. They were away from my window, so I moved them towards the window. So they started out over here on the other side of my office. I moved them towards the window just so I could take advantage of all this natural light that I have. So you can do the same exact thing. So choose a good location. This is probably the most important thing, is pick a good location that has good natural light. And if you try to start this project and it's really cloudy out on the day that you're working, maybe you wait and work the next day if you need to. But it is a good idea to have really nice natural light coming from a good big window. So you might have to rearrange some things at your house or wherever you're taking these photos a little bit. And that being said too, you could set this up outside. So if we have a nice day where it's not too cold out, you could go outside and take your photos outside. You'll just still have to set up a backdrop and everything. Okay, so choose a good location, choose a good location, choose a good location. Like I said, that's the most important part. All right, setup continued. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start out with a backdrop, and I'm not using any sort of fancy backdrop. All I did was I grabbed a couple of pieces of big railroad board that we have laying around in my classroom. So you could use something like this. A white sheet would be perfect, a white tablecloth, pillowcase, curtain, something like that. Just don't get in trouble from anyone, either at your school or at your home, from for using any of that sort of thing, but that would be fine. So if you had even a big piece of paper, you can use that. That's perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this up as sort of a backdrop and a reflector. So here, like I said, I just have those big pieces of railroad board. Here I have another t-shirt on top of them too, because I thought I could get a little bit better transition between the upper or the vertical area and then the horizontal area that my object's going to sit on. So if you look at this, we have a nice transition there, whereas here, we'd see that line, which isn't the end of the world. But here you go. Here's another option. You could just use a white t-shirt as your background, and that would be fine too. If I would have pulled this down a little bit, I could use it as completely as the background and the sort of thing that the object is setting on. So white objects act as both a backdrop and a reflector. And when we talk about reflector, it's just an object essentially that reflects light. And when you're taking actual professional portraits, you could get an actual reflector, and that's what this thing is here. But really, any object that you use to reflect light can do the same thing. So like I said, you can get one of these fancy ones. They're not that fancy and they're not that expensive either, but you probably don't have one hanging around. So you can use anything that reflects light. So a white shirt, white paper, anything like that. And here is just, I thought this was a good example because you can see this portrait is without a reflector, and then this one is just a reflector. So you can see how much lighter her face is for sure than this original picture. And that's just a reflector, not any additional lights or anything like that. So that's kind of a cool little hint for you. Okay, so there is my setup. I have my good location with good natural light. Check, yes. I have a backdrop. And that's what we're calling a backdrop. That's why it has a little quotation marks, because this isn't actually a backdrop, right? It's some paper and a t-shirt, but that is perfectly fine. So check to that. And reflectors. So backdrop and reflectors, these are 2-in-1 little handy dandy things, right? Okay, so there we go. Now step 3 is the camera settings. Don't use the flash, but that's pretty much the only rule I'm giving you. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to set your camera at. That's up to you. Here is a good place to start with your shutter speed at, sorry, I have to go back one. Shutter speed at 1/100th of a second, aperture at f6.3, and your ISO at auto. But that can and should change according to your specific conditions. So I just said start there, and then you can adjust it from there. So if you start here and your photos are turning out a little bit dark, maybe you bump that shutter speed down a little bit. Keep in mind then if you're getting too low with the shutter speed, you might have some camera shake. And aperture, you can see, or you should be able to see now the difference in the depth of field according to your aperture setting. So maybe you experiment with that a little bit too. So step 4, taking your photos. So what you want to do is simply take some photos, see how they look, and adjust accordingly. I noticed as I was taking these photos with my camera, they looked a lot lighter and brighter and on the back of my camera than they did when I put them on my computer. So just so you're aware of that, I don't know if your camera will work the same way. I used a camera just like the ones that you guys have. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Like I said, they were definitely looking lighter on the camera than they were when I put them on the computer. So these are a little bit dark for my taste. These are straight out of the camera, so I didn't edit them at all. But like I said, I'd like to see these probably a little bit brighter. But this one is pretty decent here. These two I would say are a little bit too dark. But we could fix that with some editing. Like I said, I didn't do any editing to these yet. Okay, so taking your photos continued. Let's talk about camera angle here real quick. So what is the purpose of this photo shoot? Like I mentioned at the beginning of this little slideshow, this photo shoot is intended to be like a product shoot for some sort of catalog. So we're kind of just documenting the object. So my question to you is it supposed to be a narrative or telling a story, or is it just showcasing the product? So if we're taking photos for a catalog, I would say we're showcasing the product, right? We want to capture the essence of the product, see all of the different features of it. If there are features that could be, you know, like color or whatever. We just want to be able to see it well. So it needs to be lit evenly and nice and bright and not dark and mysterious. So for these, the purpose of this project, we're just showing the product. So something like this one compared to these more artistic angles where I would say kind of no. In those, we're not really showcasing the product. Those are more about the camera angle and everything like that. But that being said, I don't like to give those kind of rules or give you restrictions like that. And obviously, if I'm looking at these photos, I think these are probably more interesting than these, right? So as I'll tell you further along the line here in the slideshow, I would say the majority of your photos should be like this one on the left here, where we're just sort of getting the nice even lighting. I tell you later that the requirement for this project is 15 photos total, or maybe a little bit more than that. I would say a good ratio would be 10 of this sort of documenting type, and then maybe 5 of your artistic version of that. Because like I said, I find these a lot more interesting than these, but that's kind of not what this project is necessarily about. I just didn't want to give you those hard and fast rules. Okay, so like I mentioned, you're going to take at least 15 photos. You're going to experiment with the lighting, camera angle, and backdrop or setup. So what I did here is I started out like this, but I thought that I needed a reflector closer to the object because I was getting a pretty dark side over here. So that's what I added here. I should have flip-flopped these pictures, but I added this piece of paper over here just to the right of the object so that I got some more light reflected back onto the object. So that's what I mean when I say experiment with the lighting, camera angle, and backdrop and setup. Move yourself around the object a little bit. You can move it closer or farther away to the window if you have some room to move around. And also move your reflecting objects. So maybe move this piece of paper closer or farther away. I just don't really want to see that in the photo, that piece of paper there. If I were to just take a corner of this t-shirt and pull it up and use that more as a reflector rather than just a backdrop, if I were to see that, that would be fine as long as I didn't see the edge of the t-shirt, if you know what I mean. I just want it to look pretty seamless. So as I mentioned before, a good ratio would be about 10 photos that document this sort of object with some nice lighting, where it's nice and even and I'm seeing the entire object. I would say about 10 of those, and then you can go with 5 of the artistic angle photos just to make the artist in you happy. Okay, so when you're done with your photos, you're going to submit them. You want to create a Google slide presentation or a Google Doc containing all of your photos and submit that. So you should have 15 or more photos showing me that you're experimenting with the camera settings and the setup of your object or backdrop, reflectors, all of that. Like I mentioned here, I don't want to see 15 or more of the exact same photo from the same spot with the same settings, because the idea here is to learn more about light and how it works within a photo. So you're going to submit your Google slide presentation containing at least 15 photos showing me that you're experimenting with the settings. And then also I want you to submit your top pick for what you think is your best photo. So out of those 15 or more photos, pick the one that you think is the best. And that can be one of those artistic angle ones, or it can be the sort of the documenting type of photo. And submit all of those in Google Classroom. Okay, and then after that, our next step is going to be sort of a studio lighting setup. All right, let me know if you have questions.